The flames licked at the night sky, turning the peaceful Colorado twilight into a hellish inferno as Olivia Nichols clutched her 3-month-old daughter tighter against her chest. Choking smoke filled her lungs as she stumbled across the dry earth, her legs threatening to give way beneath her. The heat scorched her back even as she fled, the crackling sounds of her family's ranch, everything she'd worked for these past 2 years, since her husband's death, collapsing behind her. "Keep running," she gasped to herself, the baby's frightened cries piercing her heart. "Just keep running, Adelaide." The night had been peaceful just an hour earlier. Olivia had been rocking Adelaide to sleep when she'd smelled the smoke. By the time she'd reached the main floor, flames had already engulfed the kitchen and were spreading rapidly through the wooden structure. There had been no time to save anything but her child. Her lungs burned with every desperate breath as she ran blindly toward the road that led to town, hoping someone might be passing by. The ranch was isolated, miles from the nearest neighbor, and she knew she wouldn't make it all the way to Red Bluff on foot, not with Adelaide in her arms and the night growing colder. A horse's whinny cut through the night air, followed by the thunder of hooves. Olivia squinted through smoke-stung eyes as a dark silhouette approached on horseback, slowing as it neared her. "Madam, good Lord, what happened?" The rider dismounted in one fluid motion, revealing himself to be a tall man with broad shoulders and a shadow of stubble on his jaw. "Fire," was all she could manage before a coughing fit overtook her. The baby wailed louder, her tiny face red with distress. Without hesitation, the man shrugged out of his long duster coat. In the glow of the distant fire, Olivia could see concerned blue eyes beneath the brim of a worn Stetson. "Hold on," he said, wrapping the coat around Olivia and the baby in one swift movement. "I'm taking you both to safety." The coat smelled of leather, horses, and the distinct scent of the open range. It enveloped Olivia and Adelaide like a shield against the night chill and lingering smoke. "Name's Henry Yates," he said, helping her up onto his horse. "I've got you now." "Olivia Nichols," she replied weakly, clinging to the saddle horn with one hand while holding Adelaide secure with the other. "And this is my daughter, Adelaide." Henry swung up behind her, one strong arm wrapping around her waist to steady her as he took the reins with his other hand. "Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Nichols, though I wish it were under better circumstances. Let's get you both somewhere safe, and then we can figure out what happened back there." As they rode away, Olivia couldn't help looking back at the burning structure that had been her home. Tears streamed down her soot-stained face, not just from the smoke but from the devastating realization that everything she owned was now turning to ash behind her. "My ranch," she whispered. "Everything I had." "I know," Henry said softly, his breath warm against her ear. "But you've got what matters most right there in your arms. The rest we can figure out come morning." They rode in silence for several minutes, the only sounds being Adelaide's quieting whimpers, the steady rhythm of the horse's hooves, and the occasional creak of saddle leather. Olivia felt the strength of Henry's chest against her back, his heartbeat a reassuring presence in the midst of her world falling apart. "Where are you taking us?" she finally asked. "My cabin's not far. It's not much, but it's dry and warm. You and the little one can rest there tonight." "I don't want to impose, Madam Olivia. Your ranch just burned down. There's no imposition, just a neighbor helping out in a time of need." "You're not from Red Bluff," she said. It wasn't a question. She knew most everyone in the small ranching community. "No, madam. Got a small place about 5 miles north of town. Been there about 8 months now." He adjusted his hold on her as the horse navigated a small dip in the trail. "Sorry if I'm being forward, but might I ask about Mr. Nichols?" Olivia stiffened slightly. "Thomas passed nearly 2 years ago." "Influenza," I'm sorry to hear that. Thank you, she replied softly. Adelaide never got to meet her father. Henry didn't press further, and Olivia was grateful for the silence that followed. Her mind was still trying to process the night's events. The ranch had been her anchor after Thomas's death, the place where she determined to make a life for herself and her daughter. Now it was gone, and she was riding through the night with a stranger, dependent on his kindness. As they crested a small hill, a modest cabin came into view, with a corral and small barn set off to one side. A lamp glowed in the window, casting a warm yellow light into the darkness. "Home," Henry said simply, guiding his horse toward the cabin. He dismounted first, then reached up to help Olivia down, careful of the baby in her arms. Now that they were in the lamplight, she could see him clearly for the first time. Henry Yates was younger than she'd initially thought, perhaps 30 or so, with a face weathered by sun and wind but handsome in a rugged way. His eyes were a deep blue that reminded her of summer skies, and his light brown hair curled slightly where it emerged from beneath his hat. "Let me get you both inside while I tend to Lightning here," he said, nodding toward his horse. "Then we can get you cleaned up and fed." The cabin was simple but neat, with a main room containing a small kitchen area, a table with 2 chairs, and a sitting area with a stone fireplace. A door at the back presumably led to a bedroom. "Please make yourself comfortable," Henry said, gesturing to a rocking chair near the fireplace. "I'll just be a few minutes with the horse." When he stepped back outside, Olivia sank gratefully into the chair, adjusting Adelaide in her arms. The baby had finally calmed, her tiny eyelids drooping with exhaustion. Olivia hummed softly, rocking gently as she looked around the cabin. It was a bachelor's home for certain, but not untidy. A few books were stacked on a small shelf, and a guitar leaned against one wall. There were no personal touches like photographs or mementos, giving the place a somewhat temporary feel, as if its owner hadn't fully committed to calling it home. Henry returned shortly, removing his hat as he entered. "How's the little one?" he asked, hanging his hat on a peg by the door. "Finally settling," Olivia replied. "Thank you again for your help, Mr. Yates. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come along." "Henry, please," he said, moving to stoke the fire. "And I'm just glad I was passing by. I'd been in town picking up supplies and was on my way home." He paused, glancing at her. "Are you hungry? I can heat up some stew." Olivia realized she hadn't eaten since midday. "That would be wonderful if it's not too much trouble." "No trouble at all." He moved to the kitchen area, retrieving a pot and placing it on the stove. "I'm afraid I don't have much in the way of accommodations for a lady and a baby, but you can take the bed. I'll make do out here." "Oh, I insist," he said firmly. "You've both been through enough tonight." As Henry prepared the meal, Olivia found herself studying him. There was a gentleness to his movements that belied his rugged appearance, and he moved with the quiet confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin. "If you'd like to wash up, there's a basin and clean water there," he said, nodding toward a stand in the corner. "And I might have a clean shirt you could borrow, if you'd like to change out of those smoke-soaked clothes." Olivia looked down at herself, suddenly aware of her appearance. Her dress was smudged with soot, her hair had fallen from its pins, and she could only imagine what her face looked like. "That's very kind, thank you." Henry pulled a clean shirt from a trunk and handed it to her, then turned his attention back to the stove to give her privacy. Olivia gently placed Adelaide on a blanket he'd spread on the floor, then quickly washed her face and hands before changing into the offered shirt, which hung like a dress on her slender frame. "Better?" he asked when she'd finished, careful to keep his eyes on her face. "Much, thank you." She picked up Adelaide again and returned to the rocking chair. "You mentioned you've only been here 8 months." Henry nodded, ladling stew into bowls, Came from Wyoming. Worked a cattle drive down this way and liked the country enough to stay. You're a cattleman. Was. Now I'm trying my hand at horse breeding. Got a few good mares and a promising stallion. He placed a bowl and spoon on the small table beside her chair. It's not fancy, but it's hearty. The stew was indeed simple but delicious, rich with vegetables and tender beef. Olivia hadn't realized how hungry she was until the first bite hit her tongue. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes, the only sounds being the crackling of the fire and Adelaide's occasional soft noises. "May I ask what happened tonight?" Henry finally asked. "Fire like that doesn't usually start itself." Olivia set down her spoon, her appetite suddenly diminished despite her hunger. "I don't know. I was upstairs with Adelaide when I smelled the smoke. By the time I got downstairs, the kitchen was already ablaze." She swallowed hard. "It spread so quickly. Kitchens are often the source," Henry said thoughtfully. "A stove left burning, perhaps." She shook her head. "I'd already banked the stove for the night. I'm always careful about that, especially with Adelaide." "Any lamps knocked over?" "No, she stopped, a chill running through her despite the warm fire. "There was a man in town today, Jasper Wilcox. He's been trying to buy my land for months, offering less than half what it's worth." Henry's expression darkened. "You think he might have had something to do with it?" "I don't know," Olivia admitted. "It seems unthinkable, but he was very angry when I refused his offer again today, said I'd regret being so stubborn." Henry was quiet for a moment, his jaw tightening. "Threats like that should be taken seriously. We should talk to the sheriff tomorrow." "Sheriff Parker is Jasper's cousin," Olivia said wearily. "He's never been particularly helpful when I've had concerns before." "I see." Henry's expression was grim. "Well, we'll figure something out. For now, you both need rest. We can sort through this in the morning." Olivia wanted to protest that there was nothing to sort through. She had lost everything, but exhaustion was quickly overtaking her. The events of the night, the terror, the loss, all crashed down upon her at once. Henry must have noticed, because he stood and gently took her empty bowl. "The bedroom's through there. The sheets are clean, though not fancy. There's water in the pitcher if you need it." "Thank you, Henry," she said, rising carefully with Adelaide, "for everything." "It's nothing any decent person wouldn't do," he replied modestly. "Sleep well, Olivia." The bedroom was as simple as the rest of the cabin, with a narrow bed, a small dresser, and a window covered with a plain curtain. Olivia lay Adelaide in the center of the bed, building a small barrier of pillows around her, then curled up beside her daughter, too exhausted to even remove her borrowed shirt or shoes. Despite her fatigue, sleep didn't come easily. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw flames consuming her home, felt the heat on her skin as she ran with Adelaide clutched to her chest. And beneath the terror of the fire was the deeper fear. What would she do now? The ranch had been everything: her home, her livelihood, her future, and Adelaide's. What was left for them? Outside the bedroom door, she could hear Henry moving quietly about the cabin, banking the fire for the night, settling himself on what she presumed was a makeshift bed near the hearth. A stranger's kindness was all that stood between her and complete destitution. Yet as Adelaide's soft, regular breathing gradually lulled her toward sleep, Olivia found herself thinking not of all she had lost, but of the moment when Henry had wrapped his coat around her and said those simple words, "Hold on." In that moment, for the first time since Thomas had drawn his last breath, someone else had shouldered part of her burden. Whatever tomorrow brought, she wasn't facing it alone. With that thought, Olivia finally surrendered to exhaustion, one hand resting protectively on her sleeping daughter. The soft light of dawn was filtering through the cabin window when Olivia awoke, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings. Adelaide stirred beside her, making the small mewling sounds that usually preceded her morning hunger. The events of the previous night rushed back, bringing with them a hollow ache in Olivia's chest. Gathering Adelaide in her arms, she smoothed her wrinkled dress and attempted to tidy her hair before stepping into the main room of the cabin. Henry was already up, tending to a fire in the stove. He turned at the sound of her footsteps, offering a gentle smile. "Good morning," he said. "I hope you managed to get some rest." "We did, thank you," Olivia replied, adjusting Adelaide in her arms as the baby began to fuss more insistently. "I'm afraid she's hungry." Henry gestured to the table, where he'd set out a simple breakfast of biscuits and coffee. "Please, help yourself. I've got some fresh milk from my neighbor's cow if that would help for the little one." "That would be perfect, thank you." Olivia settled into a chair, grateful for Henry's thoughtfulness. As she fed Adelaide, using a clean cloth dipped in milk as a makeshift bottle, Henry sat across from her, his expression serious. "I've been thinking about your situation," he began carefully. "If you'd like, I can ride out to what's left of your ranch today, see if there's anything to salvage." Olivia swallowed hard. "I should go with you. I need to see it." Henry looked as though he might argue but then nodded. "All right, if you're sure, we can head out after breakfast." He hesitated before continuing. "About this man, Wilcox, if he is behind this, we need proof before we can do anything." "I know," Olivia sighed. "And I don't have any, just a threat that could be interpreted different ways and my word against his. Still, people in town might know something." "Folks talk." Henry took a sip of his coffee. "May I ask, why is your land so important to him?" "Water rights, mainly," Olivia explained. "My ranch sits on the best section of Cottonwood Creek. Jasper's land borders mine to the south, and he's been expanding his cattle operation. He needs that water, especially with the dry seasons we've been having." Henry nodded thoughtfully. "And without the ranch?" "Without the ranch, I have nothing to sell but the land itself," Olivia finished for him, the reality of her situation hitting her anew. "Which is exactly what he wanted all along." "Do you have any family you could stay with?" Henry asked gently. "Anyone who could help?" Olivia shook her head. "My parents died years ago. Thomas's family is back east, and we weren't close. They disapproved of him marrying me and moving west." She straightened her shoulders, determination replacing despair. "We'll manage somehow. I still have the land, even if there's no house on it anymore. Maybe I can rebuild, or at least build something small to get us through until I decide what to do next." "Building takes money," Henry observed, not unkindly. "I have a little saved. Not much, but something." She didn't mention that her savings had been kept in a metal box in the kitchen cupboard, likely destroyed in the fire. Some problems were too overwhelming to face all at once. After breakfast, Henry saddled his horse while Olivia fashioned a sling for Adelaide from a spare shirt. The baby, content after feeding, dozed against her mother's chest as Henry helped them both up onto Lightning, then mounted behind them as he had the night before. The ride to Olivia's ranch took about an hour, and they spoke little along the way. As they approached, the acrid smell of burned wood hung heavy in the air. When they finally crested the small hill overlooking the property, Olivia's breath caught in her throat. What had once been a modest but well-maintained ranch house was now a blackened skeleton, parts of it still smoldering despite the night's passing. The barn and corral appeared untouched, though, and Olivia could see her 2 horses and milk cow grazing peacefully in the nearby pasture, apparently having broken out during the fire. "At least the animals are safe," Henry murmured, guiding Lightning down the hill. They dismounted near what remained of the house, and Henry insisted on surveying the ruins first to ensure it was safe for Olivia to approach. She watched from a distance, clutching Adelaide to her chest as he carefully picked his way through the debris. "The kitchen area's completely gone," he called back to her. "But there might be some things salvageable from what looks like the front rooms." With Henry's help, Olivia was able to recover a few precious items. A charred but intact family Bible, a metal lockbox that had protected some important papers and a small amount of money, and a singed photograph of Thomas that had somehow survived in its frame. Everything else, clothes, furniture, household goods, was gone. As they were about to leave, Henry stooped to examine something on the ground near where the kitchen would have been. "Olivia," he said slowly, "come look at this." Careful of her footing, Olivia made her way to his side. He was pointing at a small glass bottle half buried in the ashes. "Kerosene," he said grimly, "and there's a trail of it leading from here to the back door." He looked up at her, his blue eyes hard with anger. This was no accident. Someone deliberately set this fire. Olivia stared at the bottle, a cold fury replacing her grief. "Jasper," she whispered. Then, more firmly, "It had to be Jasper or someone working for him." "We need to report this to the sheriff," Henry said, standing. "I know he's Wilcox's cousin, but evidence of arson is something even he can't ignore." "You don't know Sheriff Parker," Olivia replied bitterly. "He'll find a way to dismiss it or claim anyone could have left that bottle here." Henry carefully picked up the bottle, wrapping it in his handkerchief. "Then we'll gather more evidence. Someone must have seen something." They collected the few salvaged items and checked on the animals before mounting Lightning once more. This time, Henry directed the horse not toward his cabin but toward the town of Red Bluff. Red Bluff, Colorado, was a small but growing town that served the surrounding ranches and farms. A single main street housed the essential businesses: a general store, a saloon, a small hotel, a doctor's office, and the sheriff's station. As they rode in, Olivia was acutely aware of the stares they attracted a woman in a smoke-stained dress with a baby riding double with one of the newer residents. They tethered Lightning outside the sheriff's station, and Henry helped Olivia down, his hand lingering supportively at the small of her back as they entered the small wooden building. Sheriff Parker was a heavy-set man with a perpetually suspicious expression. He looked up from his desk when they entered, his eyebrows rising at the sight of Olivia's disheveled appearance. "Mrs. Nichols," he drawled, "you're looking a mite rough this morning." "My ranch burned down last night, Sheriff," Olivia said, struggling to keep her voice steady. "Someone set it on fire deliberately." Parker's expression didn't change. "That's a serious accusation. Got any proof of that?" Henry stepped forward, placing the kerosene bottle wrapped in his handkerchief on the desk. "Found this at the origin point of the fire." There was a trail leading from the back door to the kitchen. The sheriff barely glanced at the bottle. "Could have been there for any reason. Maybe Mrs. Nichols uses kerosene for her lamps." "I use oil lamps, not kerosene," Olivia countered. "And I certainly don't spill it in a line from my back door to my stove." Parker leaned back in his chair. "Still doesn't prove anyone set a fire deliberately. These things happen, especially with women living alone. No offense, Mrs. Nichols, but you might have been careless." Olivia felt her cheeks flush with anger. "I was not careless, Sheriff. Someone burned my home down, and I believe it was Jasper Wilcox." At this, Parker's expression hardened. "Now, that's a very serious allegation against a respected member of this community. Mr. Wilcox is a successful rancher who employs half the men in this town. What possible reason would he have to burn down your little homestead?" "He wants my land," Olivia said firmly. "He's been trying to buy it for months, offering far less than it's worth. Yesterday in town, He threatened me when I refused his latest offer. Sounds to me like you're letting your imagination run wild, Parker said dismissively. Jasper's a businessman. If he wants land, he buys it fair and square. There was nothing fair or square about his offer, Olivia retorted. Henry placed a calming hand on Olivia's arm before addressing the sheriff. With all due respect, sir, there's clear evidence of arson here. Mrs. Nichols could have died in that fire, along with her infant daughter. That's attempted murder. Surely that warrants an investigation, regardless of who might be responsible. Parker's gaze shifted to Henry, assessing him with barely concealed hostility. Don't believe I caught your name, Mr. Henry Yates. I have a small ranch north of town. Well, Mr. Yates, I appreciate your concern for Mrs. Nichols here, but I'll decide what warrants an investigation in my town. Parker stood, making it clear the conversation was over. I'll ride out and take a look at the damage, but I wouldn't go making accusations against Mr. Wilcox without a sight more evidence than a bottle anyone could have dropped. As they left the sheriff's station, Olivia's hands were shaking with a mixture of rage and helplessness. I told you, she said quietly to Henry. He won't do anything. Jasper practically owns him. Henry's expression was grim as he helped her back onto Lightning. Then we'll have to find another way, he said. But first, let's get you and Adelaide somewhere safe. The hotel, perhaps. Olivia shook her head. I can't afford to stay at the hotel for long, and I'm not sure I'd be welcome there anyway. The owner's wife never approved of me running the ranch after Thomas died. She hesitated, hating what she was about to ask. Could we possibly stay at your cabin just a few more days? Just until I figure out what to do next, of course, Henry said without hesitation. You're welcome to stay as long as you need. Relief washed over her. Thank you. I promise we won't impose for long. As they rode through town, Olivia noticed Jasper Wilcox standing outside the saloon, deep in conversation with two rough-looking men she didn't recognize. When he spotted her, a slow smile spread across his face, and he tipped his hat mockingly in her direction. That's him, Olivia whispered to Henry. That's Jasper Wilcox. Henry studied the man with a calculating gaze. I'll remember his face, he said quietly. And if he's behind this, Mrs. Nichols, he'll answer for it. I promise you that. As they rode away from town, Olivia couldn't help glancing back at Jasper, who was still watching them with that same smug smile. Something in his expression sent a chill down her spine despite the warm spring day. I'm afraid of him, she admitted to Henry, her voice barely audible over the sound of Lightning's hooves. Not for myself, but for Adelaide. What if he doesn't stop at burning down the ranch? Henry's arm tightened protectively around her waist. I won't let anything happen to either of you, he said, his voice low but determined. Whatever it takes, Olivia. You have my word on that. She believed him, this near stranger who had already done more for her than anyone since Thomas had died. As they rode back toward his cabin, Adelaide sleeping peacefully against her chest, Olivia found herself drawing strength from Henry's solid presence behind her. She had lost nearly everything, but somehow she wasn't alone. That evening, after they had returned to Henry's cabin and shared a simple supper, Olivia sat in the rocking chair with Adelaide while Henry mended a bridle by the fire. The domestic scene felt strangely natural, as if they'd known each other far longer than a single day. Tell me about your husband, Henry said suddenly, glancing up from his work. If you don't mind talking about him, that is. Olivia was surprised by the request but found she didn't mind. Thomas was kind, she said, smiling at the memories. Stubborn as a mule sometimes, but kind. We met back east. I was teaching at a small school where his sister was a student. He'd come west for a few years and gone back to visit family, full of stories about Colorado and the opportunities here. "And he persuaded you to come with him?" Henry asked. "It didn't take much persuading. I'd grown up reading dime novels about the West, much to my mother's dismay." She laughed softly. "The reality was harder than the stories, of course. Building the ranch, learning to manage cattle, dealing with drought and blizzards. But we were happy." "How long were you married?" 4 years, Olivia replied. "Just long enough to build the ranch into something stable, to talk about starting a family." She stroked Adelaide's downy hair. "I found out I was expecting just 2 weeks before he fell ill. He never knew he was going to be a father." Henry set down the bridle, his expression sympathetic. "I'm sorry, Olivia, that's a heavy burden to bear alone." "It has been," she admitted, "but Adelaide gave me a reason to keep going, to fight for the ranch and make it work." "And you did," Henry said with quiet admiration. "Running a ranch alone with a baby, that takes courage." "Or stubbornness," Olivia said wryly. "Something Thomas and I shared in abundance." Henry smiled at that. "A useful quality out here." There was a comfortable silence between them for a few moments before Olivia spoke again. "What about you, Henry? Have you always been a rancher?" A shadow passed over his face. "No, not always. I was a soldier for a time after the war, then worked cattle drives, drifting from ranch to ranch." He hesitated. "Lost my family, young parents to fever, sister to childbirth. Been on my own a long while." "I'm sorry," Olivia said softly. He shrugged, the gesture dismissive but not unkind. "It was a long time ago, but it's why I finally decided to put down roots here. Got tired of drifting, I suppose. And the horse breeding, how did that come about?" At this, Henry's expression brightened. "Always had a way with horses. During the war, I worked with the cavalry units, training mounts. After, I started noticing bloodlines, how certain traits passed down. Figured I could build something with that knowledge." He stood, moving to the window to look out at the night. "I've got a stallion Storm King who's something special. Spanish bloodlines, but with the stamina for ranch work. Been breeding him to strong local mares, hoping to develop a line that combines beauty with practical ability." "Sounds like a worthwhile endeavor," Olivia said, genuinely interested. "I'd like to see your horses sometime." "I'll show you tomorrow," Henry promised. "Now you should get some rest. It's been a long couple of days." As Olivia settled Adelaide in the bed that night, her mind was filled with conflicting emotions. The grief over losing her home and possessions was still raw, and the fear of what Jasper Wilcox might do next lingered like a shadow. Yet underlying these darker feelings was a strange sense of comfort in Henry's presence, a growing trust in this quiet man who had opened his home to her without hesitation. She thought of the way he had promised to protect them, the determination in his voice when he'd said, "Whatever it takes." Such promises were easy to make, she knew, but difficult to keep. Yet she believed him. There was something solid about Henry Yates, something trustworthy that went beyond his acts of kindness. With these thoughts swirling in her mind, Olivia drifted into a more peaceful sleep than she'd expected, her daughter's gentle breathing a lullaby in the quiet cabin. The next morning dawned clear and warm, promising the arrival of summer. Olivia awoke feeling more rested than she had any right to be, given the circumstances. Adelaide was already awake, contentedly examining her own tiny fingers with the serious concentration only babies can muster. "Good morning, little one," Olivia murmured, pressing a kiss to Adelaide's forehead. "Shall we see what the day brings?" When they emerged from the bedroom, Henry was nowhere to be seen, but a note on the table explained he'd gone to check on his horses and would be back shortly. Olivia set about making coffee, finding comfort in the simple domestic task. As she worked, she could hear the sounds of horses outside, followed by Henry's boots on the porch steps. "Good morning," he said as he entered, removing his hat. "You look rested." I am, surprisingly, Olivia replied, pouring a cup of coffee for each of them. Thank you again for your hospitality. Henry accepted the cup with a nod. I was thinking if you're feeling up to it, we could head into town later. You'll need some supplies, clothes for you and the little one. Olivia hesitated. I don't know if I should be seen in town with you, Henry. People will talk. Let them, he said simply. You've done nothing wrong and neither have I. Besides, I thought we might ask around, see if anyone saw anything unusual the night of the fire. She nodded slowly. You're right, and I do need supplies. She didn't mention her concerns about money. The small amount she'd recovered from the lockbox wouldn't go far. After breakfast, Henry showed her his horse breeding operation as promised. Behind the cabin was a small but well-constructed barn, and beyond that, several fenced pastures where a handful of horses grazed. Henry led her to a corral where a magnificent black stallion stood watching their approach, his ears pricked forward with interest. This is Storm King, Henry said, a note of pride in his voice. The foundation of my breeding program. Olivia had grown up around horses, but even she was impressed by the stallion's powerful build and intelligent eyes. He's beautiful, she breathed. Henry opened the corral gate, and to Olivia's surprise, the stallion approached them calmly, lowering his head to nudge Henry's shoulder in greeting. He was a wild one when I first got him, Henry explained, running a hand along the horse's gleaming neck. Took the better part of a year to earn his trust. You have a gift, Olivia observed, watching the interaction between man and horse. He clearly adores you. Henry smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his serious face. He's a good judge of character. Would you like to pet him? Under Henry's guidance, Olivia stroked the stallion's velvet nose while Adelaide watched with wide-eyed fascination from her mother's arms. The simple moment of connection with the magnificent animal lifted Olivia's spirits in a way she hadn't expected. We should breed one of your mares to him, Henry suggested as they walked back toward the cabin. The foal would be yours, a start toward rebuilding. Olivia was touched by the offer. That's very generous, but I couldn't possibly accept. It's not charity, Henry interrupted gently. It's an investment in a neighbor. Your mare Daisy has good bloodlines that would complement Storm King's. The foal would be valuable. Before she could respond, they heard the sound of an approaching wagon. Henry's expression turned wary as he stepped slightly in front of Olivia, one hand moving instinctively to the gun at his hip. The wagon came into view, driven by an elderly man Olivia recognized as Mr. Peterson, who owned the general store in Red Bluff. Beside him sat his wife, a kindly woman who had always been friendly to Olivia. Looks like we have visitors, Henry murmured, relaxing his stance. The Petersons pulled up in front of the cabin, Mrs. Peterson waving cheerfully. Olivia, dear, we heard about what happened to your ranch. We've brought some things we thought you might need. Touched by the unexpected kindness, Olivia approached the wagon with Henry at her side. The back was loaded with various supplies. Clothes for both Olivia and Adelaide, blankets, basic foodstuffs, and even a small cradle. This is too much, Olivia said, her voice thick with emotion. I can't possibly— Nonsense, Mrs. Peterson interrupted, climbing down from the wagon. The whole town is talking about what happened, and most folks don't believe for a minute it was an accident, no matter what Sheriff Parker says. She lowered her voice, especially given who stands to benefit. Mr. Peterson joined them, his weathered face serious. Jasper Wilcox was in the saloon the night of the fire, bragging to his men about how he'd soon be expanding his operation northward. Said it with such certainty it raised eyebrows. Henry and Olivia exchanged glances. Did anyone see him leave the saloon that night? Henry asked. That's just it, Mr. Peterson replied. He stepped out for about an hour, said he had business to attend to. Came back looking mighty pleased with himself. Would anyone be willing to testify to that? Henry pressed. The older man shook his head regretfully. Most folks are scared of crossing Wilcox. He employs too many people, has too much influence, but they'll help Mrs. Nichols in quieter ways like this. He gestured to the supplies. It's not much, but it's what we can do. It's more than I could have hoped for, Olivia said gratefully. Please thank everyone for me. As they unloaded the wagon, Mrs. Peterson drew Olivia aside. Dear, I hope you don't mind me asking, but are you and Mr. Yates? She left the question hanging delicately. Oh, no, Mrs. Peterson, Olivia replied quickly. Mr. Yates kindly offered shelter when he found me and Adelaide fleeing the fire. It's purely neighborly assistance. Of course, dear, the older woman said, though her knowing smile suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. He seems like a good man. He is, Olivia agreed, watching as Henry carefully carried the small cradle into the cabin. Well, good men are rare in these parts, Mrs. Peterson remarked. And life is too short and too hard out here to worry overmuch about proprieties, if you understand my meaning. Before Olivia could respond to this surprising statement, Mr. Peterson called to his wife that they should be heading back to town. With promises to send word of any useful information they heard, the kindly couple departed, leaving Olivia standing beside Henry as they watched the wagon disappear down the trail. That was unexpected, Henry said finally. But welcome, Olivia added, looking at the supplies they'd brought. It seems not everyone in Red Bluff is under Jasper's thumb. No, but Jasper is clearly planning his next move, Henry said grimly. If he's bragging about expanding northward, he's confident you'll have to sell now. Olivia clutched Adelaide tighter. What can we do? Without proof the sheriff will accept, we can't prove he set the fire. Henry was quiet for a moment, his gaze distant. We need to draw him out, make him reveal himself somehow. How, I'm not sure yet, but he wants your land badly enough to burn your home. His greed may be the key to exposing him. Henry turned to her, his expression serious. In the meantime, I think you and Adelaide should stay here where I can keep you safe. Olivia knew she should protest, should insist on finding another arrangement that wouldn't impose on Henry or risk his reputation alongside hers. But the thought of facing Jasper Wilcox alone, with only Adelaide to protect, filled her with dread. Thank you, she said simply. We won't stay longer than necessary. Stay as long as you need, Henry replied. This place could use a woman's touch anyway. The comment was casual, but something in his tone made Olivia look up sharply. There was a warmth in his blue eyes that hadn't been there before, a fondness that made her heart beat a little faster. We should get these supplies inside, she said quickly, breaking the moment. And then perhaps we can figure out our next steps regarding Jasper. Over the next few days, a routine developed between them. Henry would rise early to tend to his horses, while Olivia prepared breakfast. They would work separately through the morning, Henry with his animals, Olivia keeping the cabin in order and caring for Adelaide. Afternoons often found them working together, with Henry teaching Olivia about his breeding program, or Olivia sharing her knowledge of ranch management. Evenings were spent in companionable conversation by the fire, planning strategies to deal with Jasper Wilcox. It was during one such evening, nearly a week after the fire, that a knock came at the cabin door. Henry immediately tensed, signaling for Olivia to take Adelaide into the bedroom while he answered it. Through the partially closed door, Olivia could hear a familiar voice: Doc Wilson, Red Bluff's elderly physician who had delivered Adelaide. Evening, Yates, the doctor said. Hope I'm not interrupting. Heard Mrs. Nichols and her little one might be staying here after that terrible fire. News travels fast, Henry remarked dryly. Small town, Doc replied with a chuckle. May I come in? Got some information might interest both of you. Henry glanced toward the bedroom door, and Olivia emerged with Adelaide, relieved to see a friendly face. Doc Wilson, she greeted him warmly. It's good to see you. And you, Mrs. Nichols. Little Adelaide's growing like a weed, I see. The doctor settled into a chair by the fire, accepting the coffee Henry offered. I'll get right to it. Jasper Wilcox came to see me today, sporting a nasty burn on his arm. Said he got it working with a branding iron, but I've treated enough burns to know the difference. That was from a splash of something burning kerosene, if I had to guess. Henry and Olivia exchanged significant glances. Did you tell him that? Henry asked. Course not, Doc snorted. I've known Jasper since he was in short pants, and he was a bully then too, but I thought you should know. He looked at Olivia seriously. He's been asking around town about you, Mrs. Nichols, where you're staying, what your plans are, and he's not being subtle about it. A chill ran through Olivia. What did you tell him? Told him I hadn't seen you since before the fire. Doc sipped his coffee. But he'll find out you're here eventually. Red Bluff's too small for secrets. Let him come, Henry said quietly. I'd welcome a visit from Mr. Wilcox. The doctor studied Henry thoughtfully. You're not from around these parts originally, are you, Yates? No, sir. Wyoming mostly before here. Doc nodded as if confirming something to himself. Thought so. There was a Henry Yates made quite a name for himself as a troubleshooter for some ranchers up Wyoming way. Man who could handle delicate situations that the law couldn't or wouldn't touch. Henry's expression didn't change, but Olivia noticed his shoulders tense slightly. It's a common enough name. Indeed it is, Doc agreed mildly. Well, I should be getting back to town. Mrs. Wilson worries if I'm out after dark these days. He rose, setting down his empty cup. Just thought you both should know what Jasper's up to. We appreciate it, Doc, Olivia said sincerely. Thank you for coming all this way. After the doctor had gone, Olivia turned to Henry, who was staring into the fire, his expression unreadable. Were you going to tell me, she asked quietly, about Wyoming? Henry met her gaze steadily. If it became relevant. And now that Jasper Wilcox is asking about me, looking for me, it's become relevant, Henry sighed, running a hand through his hair. I was hired sometimes to protect people the law wouldn't help. Women whose husbands beat them, farmers being pushed off their land by cattle barons, that sort of thing. As a gunfighter, Olivia asked, trying to reconcile this new information with the quiet, gentle man she'd come to know. When necessary, Henry admitted. I'm not proud of all of it, Olivia. But I never harmed anyone who didn't deserve it, who wasn't hurting innocent people. He leaned forward, his gaze intense. I came here to start fresh, to build something instead of just protecting what others had built. But those skills, they might be needed now to keep you and Adelaide safe. Olivia was quiet for a long moment, processing this revelation. Finally, she asked, If Jasper comes here, what will you do? Try to reason with him first, Henry said. Violence is always the last resort, not the first. But I need you to understand. Olivia, I'll do whatever is necessary to protect you both. I give you my word on that. The conviction in his voice was both reassuring and unsettling. Olivia thought of Adelaide, sleeping peacefully in the cradle the Petersons had brought. What wouldn't she do to protect her daughter? How could she judge Henry for being willing to do the same? I trust you, she said finally, but please be careful. I couldn't bear it if something happened to you because of us. Henry's expression softened, and he reached across the space between them to take her hand. Nothing's going to happen to any of us. I promise you that. His hand was warm around hers, calloused from years of ranch work but gentle in its touch. Olivia found herself not wanting to pull away, even as she knew she should. They weren't courting. He was simply helping a neighbor in need. Yet the look in his eyes suggested something more, something that made her heart race in a way it hadn't since Thomas. "It's late," she said softly, reluctantly withdrawing her hand. "We should get some rest." Henry nodded, though his gaze lingered on her face a moment longer. "Good night, Olivia." "Good night, Henry." As she closed the bedroom door behind her, Olivia leaned against it, her thoughts in turmoil. She had known Henry Yates for barely a week, yet he had become essential to her in a way she couldn't fully comprehend. He had given her shelter, protection, and hope when she had lost everything else. And now she knew he was prepared to risk himself to keep her and Adelaide safe. The realization that she was coming to care deeply for him was both frightening and exhilarating. Thomas had been gone nearly 2 years, and though she would always love him, Olivia had never expected to feel this way about another man. Was it merely gratitude, or was it something more profound? She moved to the cradle where Adelaide slept, gently adjusting the blanket around her daughter's tiny form. "What would your father say, little one?" she whispered. "Would he understand?" Adelaide made a small sound in her sleep, her perfect lips curving in what might have been a smile. Olivia smiled in response, remembering something Thomas had said once when they'd discussed the dangers of ranch life. "If anything happens to me, Livy, don't spend your life alone. Find someone good and kind who will love you both." At the time, she had dismissed the conversation as needlessly morbid. Now, she wondered if Thomas had somehow known that his time with her would be brief, that she would one day be faced with opening her heart again. With these thoughts swirling in her mind, Olivia finally lay down beside Adelaide's cradle, listening to the soft sounds of Henry moving about in the main room of the cabin. Whatever tomorrow might bring, she was grateful not to be facing it alone. The confrontation with Jasper Wilcox came sooner than any of them expected. The very next afternoon, as Olivia was hanging laundry while Henry worked with one of his mares in the nearby corral, the sound of approaching horses broke the peaceful quiet. Olivia froze, a damp shirt still in her hands, as 3 riders appeared at the edge of Henry's property. Even at a distance, she recognized Jasper Wilcox's stocky figure at the lead. The other 2 men were strangers to her, though their rough appearance and the way they flanked Jasper suggested they weren't there for a social call. Henry had noticed them too. He calmly secured the mare in the corral before walking over to stand beside Olivia, his posture relaxed but alert. "Get Adelaide and wait inside," he said quietly. "Keep away from the windows. Henry, please, Olivia." His gaze never left the approaching riders. "I'll handle this." Reluctantly, Olivia gathered Adelaide from the blanket where she'd been napping in the shade and hurried into the cabin. Through the window, she watched as Jasper and his companions reined in their horses in front of Henry, who stood with his thumbs hooked casually in his belt, the picture of a man unconcerned by unexpected visitors. She couldn't hear the conversation clearly, but she could see Jasper gesturing emphatically, his face reddening as he spoke. Henry's responses appeared measured, his stance unchanged even as the tension visibly increased. At one point, Jasper pointed directly at the cabin, and Henry stepped deliberately into his line of sight, a clear message that he would need to go through Henry to get to Olivia. One of Jasper's companions moved his hand toward his holstered gun, and Olivia's breath caught in her throat. But Henry didn't flinch, and after a tense moment, Jasper signaled to the man to stand down. More words were exchanged, Jasper's expression growing increasingly frustrated while Henry remained implacable. Finally, with a last threatening gesture, Jasper wheeled his horse around and galloped away, his men following close behind. Olivia rushed to the door as Henry walked back toward the cabin, his expression grim. "What happened?" she asked anxiously. "What did he want?" Henry ushered her back inside before answering. "He came to offer his condolences on your loss," he said, his tone making it clear what he thought of Jasper's sincerity. "And to let you know he's still willing to buy your land, though his offer is now even lower, given the unfortunate damage to the property." "Of all the—" Olivia sputtered with indignation. "The man burns down my home and then thinks he can buy my land for even less." "He denies having anything to do with the fire, of course," Henry said, pouring himself a cup of water. "Says it's a shame that a woman alone would be so careless with fire safety." "What did you tell him?" "That you're not alone anymore," Henry replied simply. "And that your land isn't for sale at any price." Olivia stared at him, processing the implications of his words. "Not alone anymore." Henry met her gaze steadily. "I told him we're courting, that we're planning to rebuild on your land together, combining our operations." He set down his cup. "I hope you'll forgive the presumption, but I thought it might keep him at bay. A woman alone is an easy target. A woman with a man at her side, especially one with my particular reputation, which he seems to have heard about, is less so." Olivia wasn't sure whether to be indignant at his high-handedness or grateful for his quick thinking. "And did he believe you?" "I'm not sure," Henry admitted, "but he was rattled enough to leave without pushing further. For now." "For now," Olivia echoed, settling Adelaide in her cradle. "Henry, he's not going to give up. If he was willing to burn down my home, what might he do next?" Henry's expression hardened. "Nothing if I have anything to say about it, but we need to be prepared." He hesitated before continuing. "There's something else." Before he left, he said something about the water rights to Cottonwood Creek. Said they never legally belonged to your husband in the first place. Olivia frowned. "That's nonsense. Thomas purchased the water rights along with the land. We have the papers to prove it." "Do you still have those papers? Did they survive the fire?" "Yes, they were in the lockbox we recovered." Olivia moved to retrieve the metal box from where she'd stored it. Opening it, she rifled through the documents inside until she found the deed to the ranch and the accompanying water rights certificate. "Here." Henry studied the papers carefully. "These look in order to me, but I'm no lawyer. Do you mind if I take them into town tomorrow, have them looked at by Judge Harmon? He's retired now, but he might spot something we'd miss." "Of course," Olivia agreed. "But do you really think there could be a problem with our water rights?" "I don't know," Henry said thoughtfully. "But Jasper seemed very confident when he mentioned it, like he knew something we don't. If there is a problem, and if he can prove the water rights aren't legally mine." Olivia didn't finish the sentence, the implications too devastating to voice. "Then we'll deal with it," Henry said firmly. "One step at a time." That evening, after Adelaide was asleep, Henry and Olivia sat by the fire, the events of the day leaving them both pensive. The pretense of courtship that Henry had presented to Jasper hung unspoken between them, neither quite ready to address what it might mean or how it had made them feel. "Tell me about Thomas," Henry said eventually, breaking the comfortable silence. "What kind of man was he?" Olivia was surprised by the question but found herself wanting to share these memories with Henry. "He was adventurous," she began, "always looking toward the horizon, wondering what was beyond it, but also practical in his own way. He knew building a ranch took patience and hard work, not just dreams." She smiled at a particular memory. "He had this habit of whistling when he was thinking hard about something. I could always tell when he was puzzling through a problem because I'd hear that same tune over and over." "You loved him very much," Henry observed softly. "I did," Olivia agreed. "We were young when we married. I was barely 19 and he was 23. We grew up together in a way, learning about ranching and about each other at the same time." Henry nodded, his gaze on the fire. "And if he were here now, what would he think of all this? Of Jasper Wilcox trying to take your land?" "He'd fight," Olivia said without hesitation. "Thomas believed that land was a sacred trust. He used to say that we don't really own it, we're just its caretakers for the time we have it." She paused, considering. But he wasn't foolhardy. He wouldn't have risked Adelaide's safety no matter what. "A wise man," Henry murmured. Olivia studied him in the firelight, noting the strong line of his jaw, the thoughtful set of his mouth. "What about you, Henry? You've never spoken of anyone special in your past." A shadow passed over his face. "There was someone once, back in Wyoming." He was quiet for so long that Olivia thought he might not continue. "Her name was Sarah. She was the daughter of one of the ranchers I worked for. We were to be married." "What happened?" Olivia asked gently. "She died," Henry said, his voice flat. "Caught in the crossfire of a range war I was hired to help end. Wrong place, wrong time." "Oh, Henry, I'm so sorry." Olivia instinctively reached out, covering his hand with hers. "It was a long time ago," he said, though the pain in his eyes suggested otherwise. "After that, I couldn't stay in Wyoming. Too many memories. I drifted for a while before ending up here." He turned his hand to clasp hers. "I never expected to find, to feel." He didn't finish the thought, but the way he was looking at her as if she were something precious and unexpected made Olivia's heart race. They had both lost someone they loved, had both endured the loneliness that followed. Perhaps that shared experience was part of the connection she felt growing between them, a understanding that ran deeper than words. "What you told Jasper today," she said softly, "about us courting, was that entirely for his benefit?" Henry's gaze was steady, unwavering. "No," he admitted. "Not entirely." The simple honesty of his response took her breath away. Part of her wanted to pull back, to remind herself that they had known each other only a short time, that such feelings couldn't possibly be real so quickly. But another part, the part that had recognized something special in Henry from that first night when he'd wrapped his coat around her, and Adelaide knew that time wasn't always the best measure of connection. "I've come to care for you, Olivia," Henry continued when she remained silent. "More than I expected to, more than I thought I could care for anyone again after Sarah. But I understand if it's too soon, if you're not ready. Thomas hasn't been gone that long and you have Adelaide to think of." "Thomas would want me to be happy," Olivia said slowly. "And Adelaide deserves to grow up with a father figure in her life, someone kind and strong and good." She met his gaze directly. "Someone like you, Henry." The hope that bloomed in his eyes was almost painful to witness, so naked was its intensity. "Are you saying?" "I'm saying that what you told Jasper doesn't need to be just a pretense," Olivia replied. "If that's what you want too." Henry moved closer, his hand gently cupping her cheek. "It's what I want more than anything," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "But I need you to be sure, Olivia. This isn't just about Jasper Wilcox or protecting your land. This is about us, about what we could build together." "I'm sure," Olivia whispered, and then his lips were on hers, gentle at first, then with growing intensity as she responded to his kiss. His arms encircled her, drawing her against his chest, and Olivia felt a sense of homecoming she hadn't expected to experience again. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Henry rested his forehead against hers. "We'll rebuild your ranch," he promised. "Make it strong again for you and Adelaide, and maybe someday for others too." The thought of children with Henry's siblings for Adelaide, a family built from love found in the aftermath of tragedy, filled Olivia with a bittersweet joy. "I'd like that," she said softly. "Very much." As they sat together by the fire, plans for the future mingling with the immediate concerns of dealing with Jasper Wilcox, Olivia felt a peace she hadn't expected to find so soon after losing her home. In Henry's arms, with Adelaide sleeping nearby, she had found a new beginning amid the ashes of what was lost. The next morning, Henry rode into Red Bluff alone, carrying the water rights documents to show to the retired judge. Olivia stayed behind with Adelaide, using the time to continue organizing the supplies the Petersons had brought, and to think about what had transpired between her and Henry the night before. Their declarations had changed something fundamental between them, transforming their arrangement from one of necessity to one of choice and affection. The pretense they had presented to Jasper Wilcox was now becoming reality, and Olivia found herself both excited and a little terrified by the swiftness of these changes. She was hanging freshly washed clothes on the line when she heard a horse approaching. Looking up expectantly, her smile faded when she realized it wasn't Henry returning but Sheriff Parker. Adelaide was napping inside the cabin, and Olivia instinctively moved to stand between the sheriff and her door. "Mrs. Nichols," Parker greeted her, removing his hat as he dismounted. "Fine day." "Sheriff," she replied cautiously. "What brings you out this way?" "Just checking in, making sure you're settling in all right after your misfortune." His gaze swept over the cabin and surrounding area. "Yates seems to be taking good care of you." There was something in his tone that set Olivia on edge. "Mr. Yates has been very kind, yes." "MMM." Parker adjusted his gun belt. "Got a message for you from Jasper Wilcox. Says his offer for your land stands despite the misunderstanding yesterday." "There was no misunderstanding," Olivia said firmly. "My land is not for sale to Mr. Wilcox or anyone else." The sheriff studied her for a moment. "That's your right, of course, though it might be the sensible thing given your circumstances." "A woman alone, I'm not alone," Olivia interrupted, echoing Henry's words from the day before. "So I hear." Parker's expression was skeptical. "Moving mighty fast from neighborly assistance to courting, aren't you? Some might wonder about the propriety of such arrangements." Anger flared in Olivia's chest. "I don't recall asking for anyone's opinion on my personal life, Sheriff, especially not from a man who couldn't be bothered to properly investigate the burning of my home." Parker's face hardened. "Careful, Mrs. Nichols. Making accusations without evidence can lead to trouble." "Is that a threat?" Olivia asked, standing her ground despite the fear curling in her stomach. "Just friendly advice," Parker replied. "Jasper Wilcox is an important man in this county, has connections all the way to the governor's office. Your new friend Yates, on the other hand, well, let's just say his reputation precedes him. Not the sort of man a respectable widow should be associating with." "I believe I'm a better judge of Mr. Yates's character than you or Jasper Wilcox," Olivia said coldly. "Now, if you've delivered your message, I have work to do." Parker replaced his hat, his expression unreadable. "Just think about the offer, Mrs. Nichols, for your sake and the little ones." He glanced toward the cabin where Adelaide was still sleeping. "Would be a shame if anything else unfortunate happened." Before Olivia could respond to this thinly veiled threat, the sheriff had mounted his horse and ridden away. She watched him go, her hands trembling with anger and fear. The implication was clear. Jasper Wilcox wasn't finished with her, and he had the law on his side. Henry returned mid-afternoon, his expression grim as he dismounted in front of the cabin. Olivia, who had been anxiously awaiting his return, hurried out to meet him. "What did Judge Harmon say?" she asked without preamble. Henry led his horse toward the barn, gesturing for Olivia to follow. "It's complicated," he replied. "The water rights to Cottonwood Creek were originally granted to the first owner of your land, a man named Caldwell. When he sold to Thomas, the rights transferred legally. But—" he paused, unsaddling lightning with efficient movements. Judge Harmon says there's a clause in the original grant that requires the water to be actively used for agricultural purposes. If the land lies fallow for a certain period, the rights can be challenged. But we've been using the water continuously, Olivia protested. The cattle are crops, I know, Henry said. But with the ranch house burned and you living here, Jasper might try to claim you've abandoned the property. Judge Harmon thinks that's likely his angle. Olivia's mind raced. So we need to show the land is still being actively used. That shouldn't be hard, the animals are still there and the land itself wasn't damaged. Exactly, Henry agreed, but we need to act quickly. According to the judge, the clause specifies a period of 30 days. If the water isn't being actively used by then, Jasper could petition the territorial court to have the rights transferred to him as the adjacent landowner. How long has it been since the fire? Just over a week, Henry calculated. We have time, but not much. Olivia nodded, determination replacing her earlier fear. Then we need to start rebuilding immediately. Not just the house, but the irrigation system for the crops, everything that shows active use of the land and water. Henry finished with his horse and turned to face her fully. That was my thinking too. I stopped by the lumberyard on my way back, asked them to deliver materials to your ranch tomorrow. He hesitated. I hope that wasn't overstepping. No, Olivia said warmly, touched by his initiative. It's exactly what needs to be done. There's something else, Henry said, his expression darkening. I ran into Doc Wilson in town. He overheard Jasper talking with Sheriff Parker at the saloon. Seems Parker paid you a visit today. He did, Olivia confirmed, recounting the sheriff's thinly veiled threats. He made it clear that Jasper has no intention of giving up. Henry's jaw tightened. I was afraid of that. Doc said there's talk of bringing in some professional gunmen from Denver. Jasper's determined to have your land, one way or another. Gunmen. But surely even Jasper wouldn't go that far, Olivia protested, though uncertainty crept into her voice. A man who would burn a woman and child out of their home would do just about anything, Henry said grimly. We need to be prepared, Olivia, and we need allies. The Petersons seem sympathetic, Olivia suggested. And Doc Wilson. But most folks in town are either afraid of Jasper or dependent on him for their livelihoods. Henry nodded thoughtfully. What about neighboring ranchers? Anyone who might have their own reasons for wanting to see Jasper's influence limited. Olivia considered this. The Simmons family to the east has had water disputes with Jasper before, and the Connors to the north. William Connor was a friend of Thomas's. They might be willing to help. Good, Henry said. Tomorrow we'll ride out to your ranch and start the rebuilding. I'll approach the Simmons and Connors, see what support we can gather. He stepped closer, taking her hands in his. We'll fight this, Olivia, together. Looking up at him, Olivia was struck by the fierce protectiveness in his expression. In the short time they'd known each other, Henry had become her staunchest defender, her partner in this struggle to keep what was rightfully hers. And somewhere along the way he had also become essential to her in ways that went beyond practical considerations. Sheriff Parker said people are talking about us, she said softly. About how quickly we've gone from neighbors to more. Henry's expression softened. Does that bother you? No, Olivia replied honestly. What bothers me is the thought that Jasper might target you to get to me, that you might be in danger because of us. I've faced worse than Jasper Wilcox, Henry said with quiet confidence, and I've never had better reason to stand my ground. He leaned down, pressing his forehead gently against hers. Whatever comes, Olivia, we face it together. You, me, and Adelaide. As if on cue, Adelaide's cries sounded from inside the cabin. Olivia smiled, squeezing Henry's hands before stepping back. Speaking of whom? That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Adelaide contentedly babbling in Olivia's arms, Henry brought up a subject that had clearly been on his mind. "I've been thinking about what Sheriff Parker said," he began, "about propriety and our arrangement." Olivia glanced at him, noting the slight tension in his shoulders. "Oh, people are going to talk regardless of what we do," Henry continued. "But there's something to be said for doing things properly, especially when there's a child involved." "Henry Yates, are you concerned about my reputation?" Olivia asked, a hint of teasing in her voice despite the seriousness of their situation. He smiled ruefully. "Maybe I am. Or maybe I'm thinking that if we're going to fight Jasper Wilcox together, rebuild your ranch together, plan a future together, we should do it as husband and wife." Olivia's breath caught in her throat. "Are you proposing?" "Not very romantically, I'm afraid," Henry admitted. "But yes, I am." He took her free hand in his. "I know it's fast, Olivia. I know we've only known each other a short time, but I also know how I feel about you and Adelaide, and I hope you feel the same way about me." "I do," Olivia said softly. "But marriage, Henry, that's a lifelong commitment." "One I'm ready to make," he said without hesitation. "Unless you need more time." Olivia looked down at Adelaide, then back at Henry. The last rays of the setting sun cast a golden glow over his features, highlighting the earnestness in his expression. She thought of Thomas, of the love they had shared and the life they had built. And then she thought of the future of rebuilding the ranch, of raising Adelaide, of possibly having more children someday, a future with Henry at her side. "No," she said finally, a smile spreading across her face. "I don't need more time. Yes, Henry Yates, I will marry you." The joy that transformed his face was answer enough, even before he leaned in to kiss her, a kiss that held all the promise of the future they would build together. The next morning dawned clear and bright, a perfect Colorado spring day. Olivia awoke early, her mind already racing with plans for rebuilding the ranch and preparations for a wedding she hadn't expected but now eagerly anticipated. Henry was already up, she knew, tending to his horses before they would ride to her property to begin the work of reclaiming it. As she dressed Adelaide, Olivia thought about the enormity of the changes in her life over the past week and a half. From the terror of fleeing her burning home with Adelaide in her arms to finding shelter with Henry. From the grief of loss to the unexpected joy of new beginnings, it was almost too much to process. Yet through it all, there was a certainty in her heart that this path, unexpected as it was right. Henry Yates had entered her life at her darkest moment and had stood steadfastly beside her ever since. That he had grown to love her as swiftly as she had grown to love him seemed not a cause for concern but a gift to be cherished. She was securing Adelaide in the sling she'd fashioned when Henry entered, his expression unusually grave. "Riders coming," he said. "Looks like Jasper Wilcox and several others." Olivia's heart sank. "How many?" "5, including Jasper and Sheriff Parker." Henry moved to the window, peering out cautiously. "The others look like hired guns." "What do they want?" Olivia asked, though she feared she already knew the answer. "Nothing good," Henry replied grimly. "Stay inside with Adelaide. Lock the door behind me." "Henry, no," Olivia protested. "You can't face them alone." "I'm not planning a shootout," Henry assured her. "Just a conversation, but I need to know you and Adelaide are safe while I talk to them." Before she could argue further, he checked his gun, ensuring it was fully loaded, then strapped it to his hip. The transformation in him was subtle but unmistakable. This was no longer just the quiet horse breeder, but the man who had earned a reputation in Wyoming for handling delicate situations. "Henry," Olivia said, catching his arm as he turned toward the door. "Be careful." He cupped her face gently with one hand. Always, he promised, then kissed her briefly before stepping outside. Through the window, Olivia watched as Henry walked calmly to stand in front of the cabin, his posture relaxed but alert as Jasper Wilcox and his companions reined in their horses. Sheriff Parker dismounted first, followed by Jasper. The other 3 men remained mounted, their hands resting near their holstered weapons. Though she couldn't hear the conversation clearly, Olivia could see the increasing agitation in Jasper's gestures, contrasting with Henry's composed stance. At one point, Sheriff Parker placed a restraining hand on Jasper's arm, only to be shaken off angrily. The tension in the scene was palpable, even from inside the cabin. Olivia clutched Adelaide tighter, her heart pounding as she watched the confrontation unfold. One of the mounted men shifted his position slightly, his hand moving to rest on his holster in a deliberate gesture. Henry must have said something particularly provocative, because Jasper suddenly lunged forward, his face contorted with rage. In a flash, Henry sidestepped the attack, sending Jasper sprawling in the dirt. The 3 mounted men immediately drew their weapons, but Henry's gun was already in his hand, trained steadily on the closest threat. No. Olivia gasped, though she knew they couldn't hear her through the closed window. Sheriff Parker was shouting something, his hands raised in a gesture clearly meant to defuse the situation. After a tense moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, the mounted men slowly lowered their weapons. Jasper pushed himself to his feet, dusting off his clothes with furious, jerky movements. More words were exchanged, Sheriff Parker doing most of the talking now. Finally, with a last venomous glare at Henry, Jasper mounted his horse. The group turned to leave, but not before one of the hired guns made a gesture that Olivia interpreted as a clear threat, a finger drawn across his throat. Only when they had disappeared down the trail did Henry holster his weapon and turn back toward the cabin. Olivia rushed to unlock the door, Adelaide still secure in her sling. "What happened?" she demanded as soon as Henry stepped inside. "What did they want?" Henry removed his hat, running a hand through his hair before answering. "Jasper came to deliver an ultimatum. Either you sell your land to him by the end of the week, or he'll file a formal complaint with the territorial court claiming abandonment and seeking the water rights." "Can he do that?" "Judge Harmon said we had 30 days. He can try," Henry said grimly. "Sheriff Parker claims he has evidence that you've permanently relocated here, with no intention of returning to your property. If the court believes that, they might rule in his favor regardless of the 30-day provision." "That's ridiculous," Olivia protested. "We've been planning to rebuild all along. The lumber is being delivered today, I told them that," Henry said. That's when Jasper lost his temper. "He's desperate, Olivia. The drought's been hard on his cattle, and without access to Cottonwood Creek, he stands to lose a significant portion of his herd. That doesn't give him the right to steal my water or burn down my home," Olivia said fiercely. "No, it doesn't," Henry agreed. "And we're not going to let him. But we need to be careful. Those men with him aren't local cowboys, they're professional gunmen, just as Doc Wilson warned." Olivia swallowed hard. "What do we do now?" "We stick to the plan," Henry said decisively. "We ride to your ranch, meet the lumber delivery, and start rebuilding. Show everyone in the county that you have every intention of maintaining your property and water rights." He hesitated before adding, "And I think we should get married sooner rather than later. Today, if possible." "Today?" Olivia echoed in surprise. "Doc Wilson is also a justice of the peace," Henry explained. "He could perform the ceremony at your ranch this afternoon. That would further establish our intention to live there, not here." Olivia considered this. The practical reasons for a quick wedding were sound, but beyond that, she found she didn't want to wait. Life in the West had taught her that tomorrow was never guaranteed. Happiness should be seized when found. Yes, she decided. Let's be married today. The relief in Henry's smile was evident. I'll send word to Doc Wilson when we reach town, and perhaps to the Petersons and any other friendly faces who might serve as witnesses. They packed quickly, gathering the few personal items Olivia had salvaged from the fire and the supplies that had been donated. Adelaide, sensing the excitement, was unusually cooperative, cooing happily as they prepared for departure. The ride to Olivia's ranch was tense but uneventful. Both kept a watchful eye for any sign of Jasper or his men, but the trail remained clear. As they crested the small hill overlooking the property, Olivia felt a surge of emotion at the sight of her land, the charred remains of the house, a stark reminder of what had been lost. But the surrounding pastures and the sparkling waters of Cottonwood Creek a promise of what could be rebuilt. The lumber wagon arrived shortly after they did, driven by a burly man named Hanson who owned the sawmill outside Red Bluff. To Olivia's surprise, he wasn't alone. Several other wagons followed, carrying additional supplies and a group of men from town. Word gets around, Hanson explained as he jumped down from his wagon. Folks heard you were rebuilding and wanted to help. Not everyone in Red Bluff dances to Jasper Wilcox's tune. Tears sprang to Olivia's eyes at this unexpected show of support. Among the volunteers were Mr. Peterson, the blacksmith, the baker, and several ranch hands from neighboring properties. Even more surprising was the arrival of William Connor and his sons from the North Ranch, along with the Simmons family from the East. Thomas Nichols was a good man, William Connor told Olivia as he dismounted. And you've run this place with just as much grit and determination since he's been gone. We weren't about to stand by while Jasper Wilcox tried to steal what's rightfully yours. Work began immediately, the men clearing away the debris from the burned house while planning the framework for a new one. The women who had accompanied their husbands set up a cooking area near the creek, preparing food for the workers and fussing over Adelaide, who was enjoying the attention immensely. Mid-morning brought another welcome arrival, Doc Wilson in his buggy, accompanied by Mrs. Wilson and the pastor from the small church in Red Bluff. Heard there's to be a wedding, Doc announced cheerfully as Henry helped him down from the buggy. Thought the pastor might be more appropriate than a crusty old justice of the peace like myself. Olivia, who had been helping organize supplies, approached with Adelaide. We're so grateful you could come, Pastor Evans, she said. It's not exactly a traditional setting. The Lord doesn't require a church building to bless a union, the kindly pastor replied. Just two hearts committed to one another and to him. Word of the impending wedding spread quickly among the workers, adding a festive atmosphere to what had begun as a construction project. Mrs. Peterson and the other women insisted on taking Olivia aside to help her prepare, using the creek for bathing and a borrowed dress from Mrs. Connor for the ceremony. It's not white, I'm afraid, Mrs. Connor apologized as Olivia slipped into the pale blue gown, but it's clean and pretty. It's perfect, Olivia assured her, touched by the gesture. The dress was indeed lovely, its simple lines complemented by delicate embroidery around the collar and cuffs. Mrs. Wilson had brought a small bouquet of wildflowers, and Mrs. Peterson skillfully arranged Olivia's hair, weaving more flowers into the dark strands. Adelaide, freshly bathed and dressed in a clean gown donated by one of the townswomen, gurgled happily in Mrs. Simmons's arms as the preparations continued. Henry, meanwhile, had been pulled aside by William Connor and the other men for his own preparations. He emerged in a clean shirt and his best trousers, his hair neatly combed and his face freshly shaved. As the sun reached its zenith, Pastor Evans called everyone to gather near the creek, where he had set up a simple altar using a small table brought from one of the wagons. Henry took his place beside the pastor, his expression a mixture of nervousness and joy as he waited for his bride. Olivia approached slowly, Adelaide now in her arms, the assembled friends and neighbors forming an aisle for her to walk through. The scene was nothing like the elaborate church wedding she'd had with Thomas back east, but as her eyes met Henry's, she knew this simpler ceremony was exactly right for the life they were building together. Pastor Evans spoke of love and commitment, of building a life on the foundation of faith and mutual respect. When he asked for the rings, Henry produced a simple gold band that had belonged to his mother, carefully preserved all these years for this moment. Olivia, having lost her original wedding ring in the fire, was touched by this tangible connection to Henry's past. I, Henry James Yates, take thee, Olivia Ann Nichols, to be my lawfully wedded wife, Henry vowed, his voice steady and clear. To have and to hold, from this day forward for better or worse, for richer or poorer in sickness and in health to love and to cherish, till death do us part. As Olivia repeated the vows, Adelaide reached out to touch the golden ring now adorning her mother's finger, bringing smiles to the faces of all present. The child was not merely a witness but a participant in this new union, a living bridge between Olivia's past with Thomas and her future with Henry. By the authority vested in me, Pastor Evans concluded, I now pronounce you husband and wife. What God has joined together, let no man put asunder. Henry's kiss was gentle but filled with promise, and the cheer that went up from the assembled guests startled a flock of birds from a nearby tree. As they turned to face their friends, now officially husband and wife, Olivia felt a sense of rightness that transcended the unusual circumstances of their courtship and wedding. The celebration that followed was improvised but joyful. The women had prepared a wedding feast of sorts, using supplies brought from town and fresh fish caught from the creek. Someone produced a fiddle, and dancing commenced on the patch of grass that would eventually become the front yard of their new home. As the afternoon wore on, the men returned to their construction work, determined to have at least the framework of the new house erected before darkness fell. Henry joined them after sharing the first dance with Olivia, rolling up his sleeves alongside his new neighbors to build the home where he would raise his new family. Olivia watched with Adelaide in her arms, marveling at how much had changed in such a short time. From the desperation of that night when she'd fled the burning ranch with her baby, to this moment of community and celebration, it seemed almost like a dream. You look happy, Doc Wilson observed, joining her at the edge of the construction site. It suits you. I am happy, Olivia confirmed. Though I can scarcely believe how much has happened in less than 2 weeks. Life out here doesn't always give us the luxury of time, the doctor replied philosophically. Sometimes we have to recognize the right path when it appears and be brave enough to take it without hesitation. Is that what Henry and I have done, do you think? Taken the right path? Doc Wilson smiled, his weathered face creasing with genuine warmth. I've known a lot of couples in my time, Mrs. Yates, some who courted for years, some who married after knowing each other a mere month. It's not the time that matters, but the foundation. And what I see between you and Henry is a solid foundation of respect, shared values, and genuine affection. The rest will come with time. Olivia nodded, grateful for the older man's wisdom. Thank you, Doc, for everything you've done for us. Just doing what neighbors should, he said modestly. Then, with a more serious expression, but you should know, Jasper Wilcox isn't going to take this lying down. The man's built his reputation on always getting what he wants. We'll be ready for him, Olivia said with quiet determination. Henry and I together, with good people like you on our side." By sunset, the framework of the new house stood outlined against the darkening sky, smaller than the original but solid, a testament to the community's support and Henry's determination. Most of the volunteers departed as dusk fell, promising to return in the coming days to continue the work. William Connor insisted that Olivia, Henry, and Adelaide stay at his ranch that night, where they would be safer than camping at the construction site. "We'll post guards around the property overnight," Connor assured them, "just in case Jasper gets any ideas about disrupting the rebuilding." Henry and Olivia agreed, recognizing the wisdom in not remaining vulnerable at the partially built homestead. They gathered their few belongings and followed the Connor family to their ranch a few miles north, where they were welcomed warmly by Mrs. Connor and provided with a comfortable room for their first night as husband and wife. Adelaide, exhausted from the excitement of the day, fell asleep almost immediately in a cradle Mrs. Connor had preserved from her own children's infancy. With their daughter peacefully sleeping, Henry and Olivia found themselves alone for the first time since exchanging their vows. "Mrs. Yates," Henry said softly, taking her hands in his, "I want you to know that whatever happens with Jasper Wilcox, whatever challenges we face, I will never regret marrying you today." "Nor I you," Olivia replied, her heart full. "It may have happened quickly, Henry, but that doesn't make it any less right." As he drew her into his arms, Olivia felt the last lingering doubts melt away. They had found each other amid fire and loss, had built a fragile hope into something strong and enduring. Whatever tomorrow might bring, they would face it together, husband and wife, united in love and purpose. The days that followed were filled with hard work and cautious optimism. Each morning, Henry and Olivia would ride to their property, Adelaide secure in her sling, to continue the rebuilding efforts. The community's support remained strong, with different volunteers arriving each day to lend a hand. By the end of the first week, the new house had walls and a roof, though it was far from complete. Most encouraging was the steady progress they made in re-establishing the ranch's active use of the water from Cottonwood Creek. With the help of the neighboring ranchers, they repaired and expanded the irrigation system for the small crop field, moved the cattle back to their usual grazing areas near the water, and even began planning for additional improvements that would strengthen their claim to the water rights. Through it all, there was no sign of Jasper Wilcox or his men, a fact that both relieved and unsettled Olivia. "It's too quiet," she confided to Henry one evening as they sat on the porch of the Connor ranch, where they were still staying until their own home was habitable. "Jasper isn't the type to give up so easily." "No, he isn't," Henry agreed, his expression thoughtful. "Doc Wilson says he's been in Denver for a few days. No one knows exactly why." "Nothing good, I'm sure," Olivia murmured, gazing at the stars appearing in the darkening sky. Henry took her hand, his touch reassuring. "Whatever he's planning will be ready. The new house will be livable by the end of the week, and there's no question now about our active use of the water rights. Legally, he doesn't have a leg to stand on. When has that ever stopped him?" Olivia sighed. "I just want this to be over, Henry. I want us to be able to focus on our future, on raising Adelaide, maybe even—" She paused, suddenly shy. "Maybe even what?" Henry prompted gently. "Maybe even having more children someday," Olivia finished, a blush coloring her cheeks. "Building our family." Henry's expression softened with tenderness. "I'd like that very much," he said, drawing her closer. "A house full of children, running around the ranch, learning to ride, helping with the horses." The image was so vivid, so hopeful that it made Olivia's heart ache with longing. "Do you think we'll ever truly be free of Jasper Wilcox, free to live that life without looking over our shoulders?" Yes, Henry said firmly. One way or another we will, I promise you that. The sincerity in his voice comforted Olivia, even as a small part of her wondered what one way or another might entail. She knew Henry's history, knew what he was capable of if pushed too far. But she also knew his heart, his deep desire to build rather than destroy. Whatever happened, she trusted him to find a solution that wouldn't compromise the man he was striving to be. Their peaceful interlude was interrupted by the sound of approaching hooves. Henry was immediately alert, positioning himself protectively in front of Olivia as William Connor emerged from the house with a rifle. "Stay here," Henry instructed, drawing his own weapon as he moved toward the edge of the porch. The rider materialized out of the gathering darkness, Doc Wilson, his horse lathered from hard riding. "Henry, Olivia," he called as he dismounted. "Thank God you're still here." "What is it, Doc?" Henry asked, holstering his gun as he recognized their friend. "Jasper's back from Denver," the doctor panted, accepting the water William offered. "And he's brought trouble with him, a judge from the territorial court, a man named Blackburn who owes him favors. They're claiming there's an issue with your original land deed, something about improper filing when Thomas first purchased the property." "That's absurd," Olivia protested. "Thomas was meticulous about legal matters. Everything was filed properly with the land office." "Maybe so," Doc agreed grimly. "But Judge Blackburn has called an emergency hearing for tomorrow morning. If you don't appear with all your documentation, he's prepared to rule in Jasper's favor by default." Henry's expression darkened. "This is a setup. Jasper knows most of our documents were lost in the fire." "Not all of them," Olivia reminded him. "We have the deed and the water rights certificate from the lockbox." She turned to Doc Wilson. "Will that be enough?" "I don't know," the doctor admitted. "But you need to be there, both of you, with whatever documentation you have. I've already spoken to Judge Harmon. He's preparing to testify on your behalf about the validity of the water rights. And the Petersons are gathering people from town who can attest to your continuous ownership and use of the property." "What time is the hearing?" Henry asked, his mind clearly already planning their next steps. 9 o'clock at the town hall," Doc replied. "Jasper's trying to make it seem official, though a proper court case would normally be heard in Denver, not Red Bluff." "We'll be there," Henry assured him, "and we'll be prepared." After Doc Wilson departed, promising to continue rallying support in town, Henry and Olivia retreated to their room to discuss strategy. Adelaide was already asleep in her cradle, blissfully unaware of the new threat to her future. "This is our chance to end this once and for all," Henry said as he spread the precious documents on the small table. "If we can prove the legitimacy of your claim in front of witnesses, even a corrupt judge will have difficulty ruling against us." "But what if the judge rules in Jasper's favor regardless?" Olivia asked. "What recourse would we have?" "We could appeal to the actual territorial court in Denver," Henry replied. "But that would take time and money we don't have much of." He studied the documents thoughtfully. "There's something else we need to consider. If Jasper is willing to go to these lengths bringing in a corrupt judge, fabricating legal issues, he's desperate. And desperate men are dangerous. You think he might try something else if the legal challenge fails?" Olivia's voice was steady despite the fear curling in her stomach. "It's possible," Henry acknowledged, "which is why we need to be prepared for anything tomorrow." He looked up from the documents, his expression grave. "I want you to stay here with Adelaide. I'll attend the hearing alone." "Absolutely not," Olivia said firmly. "This is my land, my fight. We face it together, remember? Besides, I knew Thomas's business dealings better than anyone. If there are questions about the original purchase, I'm the one who can answer them." Henry looked as though he might argue further, but then nodded, recognizing the determination in his wife's eyes. "All right, but Adelaide stays here with Mrs. Connor. I don't want her anywhere near Jasper Wilcox or that courthouse." Olivia agreed, relieved that at least their daughter would be safe whatever happened at the hearing. They spent the next hour examining the documents, preparing their arguments, and discussing potential challenges Jasper might raise. When they finally retired to bed, Olivia found sleep elusive despite her exhaustion. "What are you thinking?" Henry asked softly, sensing her wakefulness. "About Thomas," she admitted. "About how hard he worked to build our ranch, how proud he was when we finally had the deed in hand. And about how he'd feel knowing that Jasper Wilcox might take it all away tomorrow." Henry was quiet for a moment before responding. "Thomas would be proud of you, Olivia. Of how you fought for what he built, of how you've raised your daughter alone, of how you've refused to be intimidated by Jasper Wilcox." He propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at her in the moonlight filtering through the window. "And I believe he'd understand about us, about how quickly things happen between us. He'd want you to be happy, to have someone standing beside you." Tears pricked at Olivia's eyes at his words. "I think so too," she whispered. "Thank you for saying that, Henry." He kissed her gently, then gathered her into his arms. "Try to sleep, love. Tomorrow will be a long day." Comforted by his presence, Olivia finally drifted into a fitful sleep. Her dreams a confused mixture of the past and present, of Thomas and Henry, of fire and water and the land she had fought so hard to keep. The town hall of Red Bluff was crowded beyond capacity the next morning as Henry and Olivia arrived for the hearing. It seemed every resident of the small town and surrounding ranches had turned out to witness the confrontation between Jasper Wilcox and the young widow he had been trying to dispossess. Judge Blackburn, a corpulent man with cold eyes and a perpetual sneer, presided from a makeshift bench at the front of the hall. Beside him sat Sheriff Parker, ostensibly present to maintain order but clearly aligned with Jasper, who occupied a table to the right of the judge. At the left table sat Henry and Olivia, with Judge Harmon beside them as an advisor. "This is a simple matter of property law," Judge Blackburn began without preamble. "Mr. Wilcox has presented evidence suggesting that the original land deed for the property currently claimed by Mrs. Nichols or Mrs. Yates, as she now appears to be, was improperly filed with the Territorial Land Office. If this is the case, the deed is invalid, and the property reverts to the territorial government, which may then reassign it to a qualified applicant." "That's outrageous," Judge Harmon interrupted. "The Nichols family has owned and worked that land for 6 years. There's been no question about the validity of their deed until now." "You are here as an observer, Judge Harmon, not as an official of this court," Blackburn said coldly. "Please refrain from interruptions." Jasper Wilcox rose, a document in hand. "If I may, Your Honor, I'd like to present the evidence I've uncovered regarding the original filing." As Jasper approached the bench, Olivia leaned close to Judge Harmon. "What is he talking about? What could possibly be wrong with our deed?" "I don't know," the older judge murmured. "But stay calm. The more reasonable and informed you appear, the better your chances, even with a judge like Blackburn." Jasper was now explaining his claim, pointing to specific sections of the document he'd presented. "As you can see, Your Honor, when Thomas Nichols purchased this property from Harold Caldwell in 1869, the filing with the Territorial Land Office was incomplete. The survey description is imprecise, and the witness signatures are illegible. Under territorial statute, this renders the deed void." Judge Blackburn examined the document, nodding with exaggerated thoughtfulness. This appears to be in order, Mr. Wilcox. Do the respondents have any evidence to counter this claim? Henry stood. Your Honor, we have the original deed issued to Thomas Nichols, properly signed and sealed by the Territorial Land Office. He presented the document from the lockbox, which Blackburn examined with noticeably less interest than he'd shown Jasper's evidence. This appears to be a standard deed, the judge admitted reluctantly, but it doesn't address the filing irregularities Mr. Wilcox has identified. If I may, Olivia said, rising to stand beside Henry. My late husband was extremely careful about legal matters. If there had been any issue with the filing of our deed, the land office would have notified us at the time. We have conducted all business related to the property, paying taxes, registering cattle brands, filing water rights without any question about the validity of our ownership. Be that as it may, Mrs. Yates, Blackburn replied dismissively. The territorial statutes are clear. If the original filing was defective, subsequent actions based on presumed ownership do not rectify the legal flaw. A murmur of discontent rippled through the crowd. Even those with little understanding of legal matters could sense the injustice unfolding before them. Your Honor, Judge Harmon said, standing despite the earlier admonishment, I must object to these proceedings on several grounds. First, this is not a properly constituted court with jurisdiction over land disputes. Second, the alleged filing irregularities have not been independently verified by the Territorial Land Office. And third, even if such irregularities existed, the Nichols family's continuous, unchallenged occupation and improvement of the land for 6 years would establish claim under common law principles of adverse possession. Judge Blackburn's face reddened with anger. You are out of order, Judge Harmon. This is an investigative hearing, not a formal trial, and I have full authority to make preliminary determinations regarding land claims in this district. Actually, Your Honor, that's not correct, came a new voice from the back of the room. All heads turned to see a tall, distinguished man in an expensive suit making his way through the crowd. Beside him walked an official-looking woman carrying a large portfolio of documents. Governor Davis, Jasper Wilcox exclaimed, his confident expression faltering slightly. This is an unexpected honor. I'm sure it is, Mr. Wilcox, the governor replied coolly as he reached the front of the room, especially since I don't recall authorizing Judge Blackburn to conduct land claim hearings in Red Bluff. He turned to the increasingly uncomfortable judge. Edward, when I appointed you to the territorial bench, I believe your jurisdiction was limited to Denver and its immediate surroundings. What exactly are you doing here? Blackburn sputtered, his earlier arrogance evaporating under the governor's stern gaze. Simply assisting with a minor property dispute, Governor. Mr. Wilcox discovered some concerning irregularities. Yes, I've heard about these alleged irregularities, the governor interrupted, which is why I asked Miss Danvers from the Territorial Land Office to accompany me today. He gestured to the woman with the portfolio. Miss Danvers, would you please explain what you found in your review of the Nichols property records? The woman stepped forward, opening her portfolio on the judge's table. Upon examination of the complete file, I found no irregularities whatsoever in the deed transfer from Harold Caldwell to Thomas Nichols. The survey description is precise. The witness signatures are clearly those of the county clerk and a notary public, and all filing requirements were met. She extracted a document from her portfolio. The paper Mr. Wilcox presented appears to be a draft version of the deed, not the final filed version. There is no valid basis for questioning the Nichols family's legal ownership of the property. A cheer erupted from the crowd, quickly silenced by Sheriff Parker's command for order. Jasper Wilcox's face had drained of color, his confident smirk replaced by a look of barely contained fury. The governor turned to address Olivia and Henry directly. "Mrs. Yates, Mr. Yates, I apologize for this unfortunate situation. It seems Mr. Wilcox has been less than forthcoming about his evidence and his methods." He fixed Jasper with a cold stare. "In fact, I've received several concerning reports about Mr. Wilcox's activities in this county, including allegations of intimidation, misuse of his relationship with law enforcement, and potentially even arson." Sheriff Parker shifted uncomfortably at this last accusation, avoiding eye contact with anyone in the room. "I assure you, Governor, these are baseless rumors," Jasper began, but was cut off by a commotion at the entrance to the town hall. A deputy sheriff from the neighboring county entered, accompanied by two of Jasper's ranch hands, both looking decidedly uncomfortable. "Governor Davis, Judge Blackburn," the deputy announced. "These men have come forward with information about the fire at the Nichols Ranch. They're prepared to testify that Mr. Wilcox ordered them to set the blaze, with explicit instructions to make it appear accidental." The room erupted in chaos, with Sheriff Parker unsuccessfully attempting to restore order while Jasper Wilcox lunged for one of his betraying employees, only to be restrained by the deputy. Above the din, Governor Davis's voice rang out. "Sheriff Parker, I am removing you from duty pending an investigation into your conduct. Deputy Hayes from Boulder County will assume temporary authority here." He turned to the deputy. "Arrest Mr. Wilcox on charges of arson, attempted murder, and corruption of judicial proceedings." As Jasper was led away, still protesting his innocence and threatening everyone involved, the governor approached Henry and Olivia, who stood stunned by the sudden turn of events. "Mrs. Yates, Mr. Yates," he said, his expression softening, "I owe you a more complete explanation. A week ago, I received a detailed letter from Dr. Wilson outlining the situation here in Red Bluff. His account, along with corroborating statements from Judge Harmon and several respected citizens, prompted me to look into the matter personally." "We're deeply grateful, Governor," Henry replied, his arm around Olivia's shoulders. "But how did you know to be here today?" The governor smiled. "Judge Harmon sent a telegraph as soon as he learned of this impromptu hearing. I was already en route to investigate the broader allegations against Mr. Wilcox." He gestured toward the land office representative. "Miss Danvers and I had already confirmed the validity of your deed before we arrived. The testimony of Mr. Wilcox's men regarding the arson was unexpected but fortuitous timing." "What happens now?" Olivia asked, still processing the dramatic events. "Mr. Wilcox will stand trial for his crimes," the governor replied. "I suspect his influence in this county is at an end. As for you and your husband, your property rights are secure. The territorial government recognizes your full and legal ownership of the land and all associated rights, including water access from Cottonwood Creek." The relief that washed over Olivia was so profound that she found herself speechless. Henry thanked the governor again, his voice steady but his eyes revealing the depth of his emotion. As the crowd began to disperse, friends and neighbors approached to offer congratulations and support. The Petersons, who had been seated near the front throughout the proceedings, embraced Olivia warmly. "We knew justice would prevail," Mrs. Peterson said, her eyes shining with tears. "Now you and Henry can focus on rebuilding and your future together." "Speaking of rebuilding," William Connor interjected, "we should get back to work on that house of yours. After all this excitement, I imagine you're eager to have a home of your own again." Henry smiled, his arm still protectively around Olivia, more than eager. "But first, I think we need to collect our daughter and tell her the good news even if she's too young to understand it." The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. With Jasper Wilcox awaiting trial in Denver and a new sheriff appointed to Red Bluff, the atmosphere in the small community underwent a remarkable transformation. People who had lived in fear of Wilcox's influence now spoke freely, and many came forward with additional evidence of his wrongdoing over the years. For Henry and Olivia, however, the focus was squarely on rebuilding their life together. The new house on the Nichols Yates Ranch, as it was now commonly called, was completed with the continued help of neighbors and friends. Though smaller than the original structure, it was solid and well-designed, with room for the family to grow. On the day, they finally moved in exactly 1 month after the fire that had driven Olivia and Adelaide from their home, a small celebration was held. The same community that had come together for their wedding now gathered to mark this new beginning. Doc Wilson, who had played such a crucial role in exposing Jasper Wilcox's crimes, proposed a toast to the couple and their future. "To Henry and Olivia Yates," he said, raising his glass. "May your home always be filled with love, your ranch with prosperity, and your hearts with the knowledge that you are surrounded by friends who will stand with you through fire and flood." "To Henry and Olivia," the assembled guests echoed, glasses raised high. As the celebration continued around them, Henry drew Olivia aside, leading her to the porch of their new home where they could have a moment alone. "Are you happy, Mrs. Yates?" he asked, his blue eyes searching hers. Olivia smiled up at him, her heart full to overflowing. "Happier than I ever thought possible after losing Thomas," she said honestly. "You've given me and Adelaide so much, Henry a home, protection, love. I can never thank you enough for that night when you found us fleeing the fire, when you wrapped your coat around us and told us to hold on." "I should be thanking you," Henry replied softly. "Before you and Adelaide came into my life, I was just existing, not really living. Building this ranch, planning our future together, it's given me purpose again, a reason to look forward to each new day." From inside the house came the sound of Adelaide's delighted laughter as she was passed from one doting neighbor to another. The sound brought smiles to both their faces. "She's thriving," Olivia observed, "and soon she won't be the only child in this house, if all goes well." Henry's eyes widened. "Olivia, are you saying?" She nodded, joy illuminating her features. "Dr. Wilson confirmed it yesterday. We're expecting a baby, Henry, around Christmas, he thinks." The wonder and love that transformed Henry's face was everything Olivia had hoped for. He gathered her gently into his arms, mindful of the precious new life she carried. "A baby," he whispered against her hair. "Our baby. Oh, Olivia." Words failing him, he simply held her close, his strong hand spanning her back, his heartbeat steady against her cheek. In that moment, the journey that had begun in fire and fear reached its culmination in love and hope, not an ending but a beginning, rich with promise for all the days to come. As the sun set behind the distant mountains, casting a golden glow over their new home and the land they had fought so hard to keep, Henry and Olivia stood together on the porch, watching their friends and neighbors celebrate. Adelaide was now in Mrs. Peterson's arms, reaching excitedly for the colorful bunting someone had hung from the porch railing. "We should join them," Olivia said after a moment, though she was reluctant to leave the peace of Henry's embrace. "In a minute," Henry replied, his voice thoughtful. "I just want to remember this moment, everything we've been through to get here, everything we have to look forward to." He placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "Our family, our future." Olivia covered his hand with her own, her heart so full it felt like it might overflow. "From the ashes," she murmured. "To the stars," Henry completed, sealing the sentiment with a kiss that promised a lifetime of love, devotion, and the kind of happiness that comes not from an absence of struggles but from facing them together, hand in hand, heart to heart. And as they rejoined their guests, moving among the people who had become not just neighbors but family in the truest sense, Olivia knew with absolute certainty that the fire that had nearly destroyed everything had instead forged something unbreakable, a bond between two souls who had found each other at exactly the right moment, a love strong enough to weather whatever storms the future might bring. 5 years later, the summer sun beat down on the Nichols Yates ranch, turning the fields golden and warming the waters of Cottonwood Creek to a pleasant temperature for small feet to splash in. From her position on the porch, where she was shelling peas for dinner, Olivia could see Henry teaching their 4-year-old son Thomas to ride his pony in the corral near the barn. Adelaide, now 5 and a half, was supervising from her perch on the corral fence, occasionally calling out instructions to her little brother with all the authority her additional years granted her. The ranch had prospered beyond their most optimistic hopes. Henry's horse breeding program had gained recognition throughout Colorado territory, with buyers coming from as far as Denver and even Kansas City to purchase his stock. The combination of Spanish bloodlines from Storm King and the hardiness of local mares had produced horses that were both beautiful and practical for ranch work. Olivia had expanded their cattle operation as well, applying the knowledge she had gained during her years running the ranch alone, but now with Henry's strength and support to make larger improvements. The irrigation system they had hastily repaired after the fire had been completely redesigned and expanded, allowing them to grow hay and other crops more efficiently. The house, too, had grown along with their family. What had begun as a modest 4-room structure now boasted a second story, with bedrooms for the children and a small office where Henry and Olivia managed the ranch's business affairs together. The front porch, where Olivia now sat, wrapped around 2 sides of the house, providing ample space for family gatherings and quiet evenings watching the sunset. Red Bluff itself had changed dramatically since Jasper Wilcox's downfall. The trial had revealed the extent of his corruption and crimes, resulting in a lengthy prison sentence. With his influence removed, the town had flourished under more democratic leadership, with businesses expanding and new families settling in the region. Sheriff Matthews, who had replaced the disgraced Parker, was a fair and honest man who had earned the community's respect. Olivia's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of approaching hooves. She looked up to see Doc Wilson riding toward the house, his medical bag secured behind his saddle. At 72, the doctor was slowing down but still made house calls to the more distant ranches when needed. "Doc," Olivia called, setting aside her pea shelling. "What a pleasant surprise. Are you joining us for dinner?" The elderly man dismounted with the careful movements of one whose joints no longer cooperated fully. "If the invitation is open, I wouldn't turn down one of your meals, Olivia. But I actually came to check on that youngest boy of yours, Mrs. Wilson was concerned when she heard he'd been coughing at church on Sunday. Olivia smiled, touched by the older couple's continued care for her family. "James is much better today, but I'd welcome your opinion. He's napping now but should be awake soon." She gestured toward the corral. "Henry will be pleased to see you. He's been wanting to show you the new foal Storm King's grandson, with the same distinctive markings." Doc Wilson's eyes lit up with interest. "I'll head over there first, then. Never too old to appreciate a fine horse." As the doctor made his way toward the corral, Olivia returned to her pea shelling, her heart full of contentment. 2-year-old James, their youngest, had indeed been fighting a minor cough, but his natural robustness inherited from both parents meant he was already on the mend. Still, she appreciated Doc Wilson's dedication to his patients, especially the children he had delivered into the world. Henry, spotting the doctor, helped Thomas down from his pony, and after exchanging a few words with Adelaide, walked with Doc Wilson toward the barn where the new foals were stabled. Olivia watched them go, her love for Henry as strong now as it had been 5 years ago, perhaps even stronger for all they had weathered together. Their courtship and marriage had been unconventional by any standard from the night he had found her fleeing the burning ranch with Adelaide in her arms to their wedding, just days later amid the rebuilding of her home. Some in Red Bluff had raised eyebrows at the speed of their union, but time had proven the depth and sincerity of their commitment to each other. Adelaide, apparently bored with the technical discussion of horseflesh taking place in the barn, hopped down from the fence and ran toward the house, her dark braids flying behind her. Thomas, not to be outdone by his big sister, followed as quickly as his shorter legs would carry him. "Mama," Adelaide called as she bounded onto the porch. "Papa says I can help train the new filly when she's old enough. He says I have a natural seat, whatever that means." Olivia laughed, setting aside her work to embrace her daughter. "It means you sit well on a horse, sweetheart. And if Papa says you can help with the training, then I'm sure you'll do a wonderful job." Thomas arrived a moment later, his face flushed with exertion and excitement. "I didn't fall off once, Mama. Papa says I'm a natural too." "Of course you are," Olivia assured him, smoothing his tousled hair. "You come from a long line of fine horsemen on both sides of your family." The mention of family lineage prompted a familiar question from Adelaide. "Tell us again about the night Papa rescued you from the fire, Mama, please." It was a story the children never tired of hearing, their own family legend that had taken on the quality of a fairy tale in their young minds. Olivia settled into the porch swing, a child on either side of her, and began the tale they knew almost by heart. It was a warm spring night, much like tonight. I had just put baby Adelaide to bed when I smelled smoke. She told the story simply, omitting the more frightening details of Jasper Wilcox's threats and the legal battle that followed, focusing instead on Henry's timely arrival and his kindness in wrapping his coat around them both, telling them to hold on. "And then Papa brought us to his cabin," Adelaide continued, taking up the familiar narrative. "And you fell in love and got married and built this house and had Tommy and James." "That's right," Olivia agreed, hugging her daughter close. "Sometimes the most wonderful things can come from the most difficult times." "Is that why you named me Thomas?" the boy asked, as he always did at this point in the story. "After your first husband?" "Yes, darling," Olivia replied gently. "Your papa suggested it himself. He said it would be a way to honor the good man who had loved me first, and who had built the original ranch where we now live." This part of the story always filled Olivia with particular gratitude for Henry's generosity of spirit. He had never shown a moment's jealousy regarding Thomas's place in her past, had even encouraged Adelaide to know about her biological father through stories and the few photographs that had survived the fire. The sound of James crying from inside the house signaled the end of story time. Olivia rose to fetch her youngest son, who would be hungry and disoriented from his nap. Adelaide and Thomas ran off to resume their play, their attention spans typical of their ages. James, a sturdy toddler with Henry's blue eyes and Olivia's dark hair, brightened immediately at the sight of his mother. Olivia changed his damp diaper and carried him downstairs just as Henry and Doc Wilson were returning from the barn. "There's my boy," Henry said warmly, holding out his arms. James went to his father eagerly, babbling happily about something only he could understand. "No sign of fever," Doc Wilson observed, placing a gnarled hand on the child's forehead. "And his breathing sounds clear. I think whatever it was has passed, but I'll have a proper look at him after dinner if you'd like." "We'd appreciate that," Henry said, bouncing James on his hip. "Better safe than sorry, especially this far from town." As they settled around the dinner table, the children somewhat tidied for the meal. Doc Wilson in the place of honor at Henry's right hand. Olivia surveyed her family with quiet joy. From the ashes of that terrible night had risen this. A home filled with love and laughter, a ranch thriving under their joint care, a partnership built on respect and deep affection. After dinner, while Doc examined James and pronounced him fully recovered, Henry and Olivia sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the western sky in shades of gold and crimson. The older children were helping with the evening chores, a part of ranch life they had embraced with enthusiasm. "I've been thinking," Henry said, his arm around Olivia's shoulders. "Storm King's getting older now. It might be time to start looking for his eventual replacement as our primary stud." "Do you have a candidate in mind?" Olivia asked, leaning into his embrace. "I was thinking about that bay yearling from Storm King and Daisy's line, the one with the white star. He's showing a lot of promise." Olivia smiled at the mention of her mare Daisy, who had indeed produced several fine foals with Storm King, just as Henry had proposed that first day he had shown her his horses. "I think that's a wonderful idea. Have you thought of a name for him yet?" Henry was quiet for a moment, contemplating. "What about Phoenix?" he suggested finally. "It seems fitting given everything." "Phoenix," Olivia repeated softly, rising from the ashes. "Yes, that's perfect." They sat in companionable silence as the last rays of sunlight faded from the sky, giving way to the first stars of evening. From inside the house came the sounds of Doc Wilson entertaining the children with one of his tall tales, punctuated by Adelaide's delighted giggles and Thomas's earnest questions. "Sometimes I can hardly believe how blessed we are," Olivia murmured. "After everything that happened, to end up here like this." "It wasn't luck," Henry said, his voice warm with certainty. "It was courage yours first and foremost. Running from that fire with Adelaide, refusing to be intimidated by Jasper Wilcox, choosing to rebuild instead of giving up." He kissed her temple gently. "I just had the good fortune to be riding by at the right moment." "More than good fortune, I think," Olivia replied. "Providence, perhaps." Henry nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Whatever brought us together that night, I'm grateful for it every day." "You and the children are everything to me, Olivia." "Everything." The simple declaration, spoken in the gathering dusk of a summer evening, echoed the vows they had made 5 years earlier amid the ruins of her burned home. Then, they had been virtual strangers, united by crisis and a growing affection. Now they were partners in every sense, their lives so deeply intertwined that Olivia could scarcely remember a time when Henry hadn't been beside her. As they eventually rose to join Doc Wilson and the children inside, Olivia paused on the threshold of their home, looking back at the prosperous ranch spread out before them, the fields they had irrigated together, the horses they had bred, the life they had built from the wreckage of what had come before. She thought of that desperate night when she had fled the burning ranch with Adelaide clutched to her chest, certain that all was lost. And then Henry had appeared out of the darkness, wrapping his coat around them both, telling her simply, "Hold on." She had held on to hope, to courage, to the belief that she could rebuild. And in holding on, she had found not just shelter but a love that had transformed tragedy into triumph, loss into abundance, endings into beginnings. The door closed softly behind them, enclosing the family in the warmth and light of the home they had created together, a beacon in the vast Colorado landscape, a testament to the resilience of the human heart, and a promise kept through fire and time. To hold on, no matter what might come.